I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you as I've been doing some studying today, preparing for tomorrow, the Lord's Day, and going through the book of Philippians with the congregation of Emmanuel Baptist Church, and talking about the essentials for growth and godliness. And we've been here for 3 weeks on just this topic, but those of you who are members of my church know that we don't go anything quickly. We were just under 6 years studying the Gospel of John, so. But slower is better than faster, deeper is better than shallower, longer is better than shorter in expository preaching. So, but I got this thought, and it's in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 10. And one of the essentials for growth and godliness that the Apostle Paul talks about is being without offense. He talks about the Greek word for that is aproskopos, and it basically means without offense, without stumbling, without causing to stumble. And that was an interesting thought, and a basic thought that I want to give you all today, real quickly, as I just took a little break, because I think it's a lost art in the church. It's a lost thought because we live in an age of rights. We live in an age of I've got a right to do this. I'm not convicted about that yet, as one church member told me years ago. And it's not about in our Christian life what we are and are not convicted about necessarily. It is about in our Christian life what does or does not cause someone to be offended. There are things in your life that you personally may be able to participate in that someone else cannot participate in because of their conscience. And you should never, ever violate your conscience. One of the cross references, or one of the cross ideas from Philippians 1:10 is in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, when Paul is talking about meat being offered to idols. A wonderful passage, wonderful text on this, wonderful thought. And the thought was this. If eating meat is going to cause my brother to stumble, Paul says, I'm not going to eat meat. Because the whole idea there is in Corinth, they were offering meat to false idols, taking that meat down into the open market and selling it to people to take home and eat with their families. And there were Christians in the church of Corinth that were being saved out of that type of worship. And they were coming into the church and they were conscionable about the fact of eating meat offered to idols because they were practicing that, offering this meat to idols and worried about offending someone or worried about eating that meat to idols. So Paul's idea was, listen, we understand that an idol is nothing. We understand that when that meat is offered to an idol, again, this is all in 1 Corinthians 8, we understand that that is not being offered to anything real. He says, but we also understand that not everyone has that knowledge, that not everyone has that understanding. And to some, it's a big deal. To some, it's unconscionable. And I like this illustration, and I think this kind of brings this thought home just a little bit for you. If you have two Christians, one is a mature believer, and then you have another that is newly saved. And let's take the illustration from Corinth. You've got a person that just got saved out of that demonic worship. He came into the church of Corinth, and he immediately has people that he wants to evangelize. Say a friend on the job. He wants to see him become a Christian, and he begins to tell him about his faith in Christ, and he links himself up with a mature believer that's already in the church to help evangelize this person. Well, they get invited over to dinner one night, and the younger Christian, who's just saved out of demonic worship, asks this mature Christian to go with him. And so they go and they sit down at the table, and out pops this big old plate of meat. Well, immediately the younger Christian's mind goes back to it, and he asks the question, "Oh, where did you get this meat?" "Oh, I got a great deal on this meat. I bought it down at the open market for Ashtaroth. There was meat that they had offered to idols, and I got it at a great deal." And now he's thinking to himself, his conscience, at least at this point, because he hasn't grown in grace a lot at this point, his conscience will not allow him to eat that meat. And so he looks over at his buddy, and his mature Christian says, "I can't eat that meat." And what does he do? What does the older, mature Christian do? He runs the risk of doing two things. A, he runs the risk of, if he denies eating the meat, he runs the risk of offending the host and therefore ruining the possibilities of ever leading this person to the Lord. Or B, he runs the opportunity of offending the Christian brother that's with him. So what does he do? Well, the happiness boys or the those type of people would say, you evangelize at all costs. You tell that younger brother of yours to suck it up and eat that meat. Do you want to lose every opportunity you have to witness to these people? You eat that meat, you be quiet about it, and you go on. But is that the biblical answer? Well, no, the biblical answer is you never violate your conscience. So you should never offer that person or tell that younger Christian to eat that meat in violation of his conscience, because him who knows to do good and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. So even though that activity would not in itself be sinful, it would be sinful for that younger Christian because it violates his conscience. And for the older believer to ask that younger Christian to violate his conscience would be sinful. And so you should never engage in that. And so as the mature Christian, you should say, I can't eat that meat, because by eating that meat, you would cause your younger brother to stumble. And Paul says, if it causes my brother to stumble, I'm not going to do it. And so just a quick thought this morning to the church, that we as Christians, we need to be people that are growing in godliness. And one of the ways that we grow in godliness is not being persons that are offensive in our actions. We need to be blameless. We need to be people of integrity. And even though the actions that we are doing may not be sinful for us, if we know that they are conscionably sinful for someone else, in other words, their conscience tells them that they cannot do that, even though we have no problem with it, and biblically there's no problem with it, we need to be mindful of the integrity and the spiritual growth of that younger believer and not do those things that cause someone else to stumble. Thanks for watching.